Let's go ahead and start recording. So it looks like we're recording just fine. And this is Cody Cussis from Suro Consulting. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about, we had a question looking at the different types of class intervals methods, or different types of breaks on a map. So once again, just a disclaimer, these are my opinions. They are not necessarily the official views of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Council of State and Territorial Epidemiologists, or any state or local health department. Just want to make that clear that I'm speaking as an individual here. And so I want to address this a little bit more because as we make maps, we have a discussion. We want to think about what colors we use and how we break those colors up. And so this particular map is looking at American Community Survey income. It's something that we have other videos on. And we're looking at the quantile-based method over here, and we're looking at a Jenks-based method. In this particular case, I have 5 breaks, so that's going to be bottom 20% of income, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and 80 plus. And then over here we have Jenks, which also has 5 breaks on it. And one of the things about the quantile method you'll see is that it forces a fifth of our map to have this kind of red high income category, whereas Jenks doesn't necessarily require that. So even though we have the same number of breaks, we're going to see things look a little bit differently in them. One of the recommendations that the CDC does have is that in the case of skew data, and income is actually a skewed data set. In general, income tends to have skew out to the right. I have to think of my skew to the right, skew to the left. That we see that those higher income areas are better captured that way. Kind of just looking at the general theme, I like to focus on the high income areas. So the other thing we see is that once again, kind of everything really gets caught up in here. So we see a lot of high income areas in North Dakota. Whereas going with the Jenks, there's a little bit more of a natural split. And so kind of where to go with things is that really going back to the answer we gave on the WebEx, it really comes down to what does the data analyst want to show with things. In this particular case, does this map tell the story that we want to tell, which is that we have the 5 classes of income and that we're going to see the counties that are going to be in those classes? Or do we like this one a little bit more, where there's a little bit more flexibility for that income to vary, and we tend to see a little bit more clustering? The other thing to notice about these two is that if we look at the quantile, I think this is the really telling thing, which is if we look at quantiles here, about 20% of our data is just right between 23,000 and 26,000. And income's something where practically I go, okay, that's a $3,000 spread. That's not very much. Whereas over here in income, we see that these spreads are a little bit wider. So the Jenks is actually picking up. It's really grabbing these, it's kind of using that range of the data and really focusing more on some of the higher range spread here. This is kind of grabbing that middle a little bit more. And so that's another thing to focus on is how does it look? Do these breaks look about where you'd like it to be? Is that telling the story that you want to tell with your data? So that's a little bit more thorough discussion. We have a mapping document available that kind of goes through a lot of the questions, but this is one that I just want to spend a little bit of time answering because as you make maps, it's going to be important to think about how things, what use for those breaks, and certainly you can tell stories that look very different even though the data is exactly the same. This is the same variable mapped on 2 different things. Every county does have the same income in both of these maps. It's just because of the breaks, this one shows a lot more darker counties with a high income than this one. So that's looking at 2 different types of class intervals.